Hey, True Believers, Englentine here with a review of Brian Michael Bendis' first issue of Superman. Yeah, I know, he did the Man of Steel miniseries. This is the official first issue of the Brian Michael Bendis run of Superman. And it's a good thing, too, because that whole Peter Tomasi thing was a train wreck with all of its good writing and its really good art and storyline, the familial feel. The fact that, I mean, even Dan Jurgens had his run on it, and that was cool. So, yeah, well, you could absolutely see why they needed to reboot Superman. I mean, a lot of people were really satisfied with Superman titles and were just loving the like I said, the family dynamic, the action, everything involved was pretty good. And I recommended it so often. There was really just not a lot of Superman stories that I didn't recommend, to tell you the truth. So when you break it down like that, when you really just look at the Superman titles of the Rebirth era, you can understand why they absolutely 100% needed to reboot it and give it to Brian Michael Bendis, who was previously writing Riri Williams. And that should tell you exactly that he's come in to save the Superman titles. Yeah. Anywho, we've already discussed this at quite great length. Many people were like, oh, God, why are they doing this? And I still ask that question. You know, this is the greatest case of fixing something that wasn't broken that we've seen in a long damn time. Of course, the Man of Steel miniseries gave us an idea of where Brian Michael Bendis wanted to take the book, and if you haven't read that, don't worry. The splash page is just one picture of a close-up of Superman, and the rest of it is all text explaining what happened in the miniseries Man of Steel. Now, as far as the Man of Steel is concerned, I only really did a review of maybe the first two issues. Or actually, I did an issue of the first three. I remember I did 1 and then 2 and 3 together. And the reason I did 2 and 3 together is because issue 2 was not necessary. Actually, nor was 4. This really was a 4-issue miniseries stretched out to 6 issues. It wasn't really all that great. The one thing I can say for it, though, it did what Brian Michael Bendis was setting out to do, I think. He wants to write the lone Superman. I've never understood this version of Superman. The guy he's the last son of Krypton, so in order to do that, he has to get rid of everything that makes Superman Superman as far as the people who surround him. And he's done that. Supergirl's gone off to space to find out who is behind Ragarthal, and Lois and John go off to space with Jor-El. So the city Kandor's destroyed, the Fortress of Solitude's destroyed, although there's a scene here where he gets another one. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I should say minor spoilers. I'm not going to spoil the heavy stuff or anything, because there's really nothing heavy to spoil here. One thing I'm going to say that's good about this book that I thought Catwoman #1 was bad for was it doesn't really deal with the fallout of what happened before it. With Catwoman #1 and the wedding that she skipped out on, it really was just an afterthought, it seemed like, that they would mention what happened between her and the Batman. Here, the entire issue is all about how he's dealing with the fact that his family's gone. I mean, he's a family man. And his wife and his child left. You know, for all intents and purposes, he is living as a freshly divorced person. Not that it's permanent, but he is. And then it deals with the Fortress of Solitude. It deals with Kandor. And I appreciate that. This is not brushing things under the rug and saying, yeah, okay, it happened. Whoop-a-doo, let's go. No, he's dealing with it, and I appreciate that. I got to give credit where credit is due, and this is something that Brian Michael Bendis did that I personally think was a strong part of this book. Now, it does have flaws, and I'll go over those. It's not the perfect book. It really is. Once again, Brian Michael Bendis is proving that he cannot write a comic book. And by that I mean he cannot write a 22-page comic book. He's writing a trade paperback, and he's pacing the comics as a trade paperback. And I guess he sees that as its final form, so that's why he writes comic books this way. If you're buying them individually, it's going to seem disjointed. It's going to seem oddly paced. It's definitely taking its sweet-ass time. I hope he doesn't do the bit with the Man of Steel where there's entire issues that aren't necessary in the story. Let's talk about this. So, he destroys the Fortress of Solitude in Man of Steel, and then immediately gives him a new Fortress of Solitude. Sorry, it's an unnecessary plot point. Next thing we see is him going, oh, and he has a new fortress, and the location of which is undisclosed. Well, here's a way to disclose it. Just look at the nexus point of what caused the freaking tidal waves that destroyed many, many coastal cities. I'm sorry, Superman, you cannot have that much water displacement and not cause tidal waves or not cause some sort of ecological disaster. Something is going to get hit. Something is going to be affected by this. I'm sorry, but it would. That part just did not sit well with me. The Antarctic isn't remote enough. You've got to find someplace in the middle of the ocean? No, dude. First of all, destroying something to come back and immediately replace it is bad storytelling. But to put it in the middle of the ocean when you're trying to find a remote spot, and the former spot was in the middle of the freaking Antarctic, it just doesn't make sense. It's possibly the dumbest of all moves that Brian Michael Bendis has done so far with Superman. It just one, it's bad storytelling. Two, it just doesn't make sense. And then he tries to follow up his first really, really bad decision with his second really, really bad decision, and has Martian Manhunter act just a wee bit out of character. He has John Jones tell Superman that he should look to be a certain kind of leader of the world. And we've seen how that pans out in Injustice. But it's just surprising that anybody would think John Jones would actually suggest that. Now, this is told against a whole bunch of action scenes which look like they could be an entire issue worth of battle. And now, granted, I like the character moments. I really do. I just thought it was weird that they had, giant kaiju monster, gotcha. Okay, the fires have been going on. That's a normal thing that's been happening since the first Man of Steel issue. And I'm sure they're going to deal with that at some point in time. But then there's another one where it looks like he's fighting Gorilla Grodd. Okay, that would have otherwise been an issue. And it's just kind of funny to me the way that he's glossing over these former, I should say, dangerous villains, I guess, which, I don't know, it just didn't. Like I said, it's not a bad book. It's not going to offend you, I think. It's entertaining enough, but it definitely it leaves something to be desired as well. I think there are better Superman stories to be told. I'm just not sure Brian Michael Bendis is the one that's going to be telling it. Yeah, I just don't see it. I'm sorry. But there are people who have done a much better job, and there are people who have done a much better job a lot more recent. It's not like we are coming off of a bad time for Superman comic books, and Brian Michael Bendis is coming in to save it. Unfortunately, it seems like the complete opposite. No, I'm not saying he's destroying it. It's entertaining. It's just, really, I guess if I'm looking for the proper word, like if I was to say what the Brian Michael Bendis books really are to me, I would have to settle with boring. I just don't think that anything he's done so far has been particularly memorable.